All right, my friends. It is wonderful to be back to our studies through the Igros Moshe. We have some friends, by the way, on the phone over here. We got Laura Levendando, Joe Flalo, Toby Schaefer. Good to have you guys on with us. And you could briefly say hi to all the people here in person. There you go. Yeah. So, as I may have mentioned, Toby was Toby. Were you adult ed chair before, Marina? I forgot. Was it
Yeah, before I was president, I was adult ed chair. Well,
Oh, so
but
you guys.
before that, I was vice president. For many years, I was adult ed chair. Yeah.
So again, welcome, David. I get you. So this is so Lee and Michelle by association are heading our adult ed committee. So
Good
they
luck. Good luck.
you're doing a great job. So you guys if you ever want to trade notes or anything, you know. All right, there are some sheets here. Okay, my friends. As promised, we are going to talk about issues related to a really fun topic called Zmanim, which is about prescribed times for talis, tefillin, and prayer. But because we are doing the Igros Moshe, the style that I like to do is not just straight halacha. I generally try to pick a topic that has either like a historical or ideological, interesting, juicy element to it. So while the initial question we're going to deal with may sound like a very standard halachic question that doesn't, maybe wouldn't necessarily you want to start a whole social media war over it or something. We're gonna see how it develops actually. And if you look in the packet, by the way, just glance briefly at page 8 through the top of 11. Yes, there's a nice article in English in the packet. So we are going to have a balkore today, or Balatkri. I don't know what I don't know if there is a feminine for it. Probably isn't. I remember the first time when I was at YU, and we went on a trip during the winter. We went on these winter mission trips, right, Toby? We remember mission trips, or I remember hearing those things. So we went
I
on
never went on one, but
I never either. My job was to hold down the fort. So there's this thing. So we went on basically just I don't know why they're called missions. Basically, I went on a winter break vacation. That's really what it was. So we went to Houston, Texas. I remember I was so excited, like, oh, we're gonna see cowboys and everything, Texas, And then we get to Houston, I'm like, oh, it's just like another city, basically. But anyway, I remember getting a tour of the Jewish day school over there, and it had like Hebrew words on kisei for chair and shulchan for table, and then for some reason, then it had like chazan and chazanit in like the kids' room. I was like, I don't think that's a Hebrew word, chazanit. I never heard of that before. So that was my first exposure to the word chazanit. So I don't know what they call the balak kriya or something like that. Anyway, my friends, we're going to say feminism and women's issues for a future year. We have more fun things to do tonight. So the first shuva we're looking at over here basically is it is getting darker. I don't mean literally, actually at this moment it is getting darker. That wasn't a statement about our reality or existential. But as we get into the winter season, we deal with more darkness, my old friend. And we have questions of halacha that come up, particularly in the morning. I checked the Zmanim here. I think the earliest time for talis and tefillin could actually drop a little bit after 6:30 a.m. in the morning, right? Right, I think it's going to exceed 6:30 a.m. And this is a challenge because Mondays and Thursdays, in order so that we could get to work or kids to school or what have you, we daven Mondays and Thursdays when there's Torah reading at 6:30 a.m. This was an issue I remember. It's a perennial issue. Every year it comes up. So at my previous shul, Toby, at a good shalom at the 6:30 a.m. minyan. So I was assigned to the 6:30 shacharis. So I kept a bookmark on a certain shuva from Rav Moshe Feinstein that I would come back to every single year to explain the proper procedure. So we're going to get there. That's our second shuva for tonight. Our first shuva brings us all the way back to Tuf Reish Tzadi Beis and Kislev, which anyone know what year that is? 1931. So this is before Rav Moshe Feinstein emigrated to America. In fact, it says it's in Luban. which is where he was the rabbi for many years. That's where he was the Rav. I think it was one of those places, you hear those stories about how the shoemaker in Europe knew Shas backwards and forwards. So this was actually that kind of town. So this is in Luban already, the question. And the question basically goes as follows. This is the first source. You're welcome to follow along inside should you wish to do so. Someone who goes to work and he's busy all day, the efshir lo sham laniach tefillin, he will not get a single chance to put on tefillin b'chol yom. Im yesh lahater lo laniach tefillin kodem amud hashachar. Can we permit him to put on tefillin before the crack of dawn? So a little bit of background is necessary. There are a few stages in the morning. So I mentioned this in shul already about Talia getting very excited. I want to watch the movie with the sun going up. And I'm like the sunrise. And I'm like, is it the Fiddler on the Roof? Sunrise, sunset? I don't think we showed you that one yet. So then I realized it was The Lion King. I say, Savenya, or the sun comes up. I always thought about that also about Neitzachama. So first is Alos HaShachar. That's the crack of dawn, the first lights coming up. Then there's Misha Yakir. That's the time for Talis and Tefillin, which is enough light that I could basically either discern between my blue and white tzitzis, or I could recognize my friend from about 4 amos away, about 6 feet away or so. So that's Misha Yakir. That's the earliest time for Talis and Tefillin. And then there's Neitzachama, where the sun actually begins to rise above the horizon, and that's the earliest time when we're ideally supposed to coordinate Shemona Esrei for. So when you hear about a Vasikin minion, that's what they're doing, essentially. They're coordinating to get Shemona Esrei at Neitzachama. However, B'di'eved, if somebody, let's say, is in extenuating circumstances, they could daven as early as dawn, as alos hashachar, right? So these are the key terms for tonight. They'll come up so frequently that it's best to just translate them. And if you need to make a notation or something, right over here. But alos hashachar, crack of dawn, Misha Yakir, earliest time for Talis and Tefillin, and then Neitzachama is when the sun comes up. That's the time generally for Shemona Esrei. So, but here's the thing. What if I am up before Alos HaShachar? I'm up at 3 a.m. in the morning, and I already got to get on a truck or get on a bus or get on a subway or whatever I'm taking to what?
Be a nurse.
Yeah, nurse or my brother-in-laws are lawyers. So when Gabe, he's Merce's older brother. It's at Debevoise in Plimpton. So sometimes he was just basically there till 2 a.m. in the morning. Then they just got him a taxi back at that point. So while the nurses are heading out, the lawyers are coming back. It's at the in the middle of the night. So anyway, so what should somebody do? What recourse is there if he's going to be at work the entire day until from dusk, not even dusk, prior to dawn and then to dusk? So what are they supposed to do? So he says, he says that if you're already up for the day, even though it's before the Zman, before the prescribed time, nonetheless, you will wear it. And now here's the question. Okay, I can wear it, but can I make a bracha on it? Well, I don't know. Let's take a look. So what I took the liberty of doing was to slip right in over here, the Torah. The Torah, of course, is one of the foundational works of halacha. So just a very quick refresher. In the medieval times, the 3 pillars, we consider them to be the Rambam, Rif, and the Rush. They were of the 3 pillars of medieval halacha. Rambam, of course, codified things in the Mishnah Torah. The Rush and Rif did their own things. And then the Torah, essentially, along with other sources, created his own code of law. And then the Shulchan Aruch further streamlined it from the Torah. So Torah over here says as follows. Look at the 3rd paragraph, final paragraph on Os Beis. This is the one with all the bolds and underlines, and as you can tell, I thought that was the most important part. Here's the thing. This question, in our Igros Moshe series, we're going to talk about issues about, new technologies, whether they be medical devices or microphones or electronics. But so those are newer things that Moshe had to deal with. This question, by the way, there's no reason this should be a new question in the 20th century. This is literally an age-old question that everyone has had to deal with. And in fact, that's why Moshe could say, I don't need to come up with any unique position over here. Just let's take a look and see what it says in the Torah. And the Torah says, if someone needs to go on a journey, he can wear them before the Zman without a bracha. And when he gets there, he will just basically move around the tefillin a little bit on his head, adjust them, and then make the bracha. But that's the standard normative halacha. But for Rabbeinu Peretz Kasav, that we have a minority opinion from Rabbeinu Peretz, he writes, "Dekaim delayla zman tefillinhu," that actually, unlike tzitzis, tefillin fundamentally could be worn at nighttime. It's just that we're concerned that someone's going to fall asleep in them. So that's why we don't wear tefillin at night. We don't want to fall asleep with our tefillin on. But Misha wrote a lot says laderech, if someone's already up for the day, they're going on a journey, he could put them on before the prescribed time. And he can even make a bracha on them. Now he says at the end, Vadoni Avi, Zichron Levracha, the Rush does not agree with this. So this is a minority opinion. But Ramosha Feinstein says, if we now go to Os Gimel over here, I'll explain this and then we'll pause. If we look in the bold in Os Gimel in the left column, where he's not going to have another opportunity to wear the tefillin until nighttime, which he won't be able to then put it on for the first time. Yesh lasus karabenu peretz. We can paskin like Rabbeinu Peretz that we can also make a bracha, and this is the key over here. We'll return to this point toward the end. Va'anos vada yesh lahachshivo. This person is considered to be an anus. Now, who wants to render the term anus? I can never get like a good what?
His hands are tied.
His hands are tied. Yeah, essentially. I don't have a good noun for the term, but ones is something that's beyond our control. We have a principle in halacha. Ones rachmana patri. I have to do the best I can, and you know what? If I can't do something, and I've made a good faith effort, God doesn't hold me accountable. That's an anus. So he says here too, this is considered an anus, and he says, we're not going to mandate this person to forfeit his parnasa, to forfeit his livelihood. That this was the Shalashos exclusive that we did. There's a little bit of an appendix in the back of this over here. That the idea is that there's a cap that one has to pay maybe up to a fifth of their assets to perform a positive mitzvah, but there's a cap on that. Here, if we were to tell him that you cannot go to work because otherwise you will not be able to fulfill the mitzvah tefillin, we're telling you to forfeit all of your parnasa, all of your finances to fulfill a positive mitzvah. Tefillin is important, but any positive mitzvah for the most part is not going to be important enough to tell someone to forfeit their parnasa. This isn't an external consideration. This is an inherent consideration within the halachic system that we're hearing about here. The kol shekeh b'medina zo, certainly in this country. Now, when I first read the tshuva, I thought he was talking about America. He does apply the same to America. We'll see elsewhere where he does that. But here it's in Russia. But the same applied in America as well. Remember, Ramosha Feinstein, we didn't look at these sources yet, but perhaps one of his most iconic teachings is that he always lamented, and this comes up in several places in his drushos, in Darash Moshe, where he lamented that people, they had, understandably, it was hard to have a parnasa in the early 20th century America. They said, right, that you got a job at the beginning of the week, and then you said, I can't work on Shabbos, so you're fired at the end of the week, and then rinse and repeat, find a new job the next week. So people would say, it's schwer zu sein a Yid, it's tough to be a Jew. And he said, not to minimize the struggle, but if all what happens is that we come home and we tell the kids how tough it is to be a Jew, the next generation is going to say, maybe we ought to not be Jewish. Doesn't sound like such a great idea. So he was always emphatic that we have to emphasize that it's a zechus, that it's I think the word he uses, it's a machaya, that it's a great thing to be a Jew. And now I think in NCSY circles, they made up a song about it. They say, Geshmak to be a Yid. They sang that over Simchas Torah, I think, over here, the Bachram who came from YU. Oh, yeah?
I heard it first in the Chabad circle.
I was going to say it's a Chabad song.
They're all the neo-Hasidus world and all at YU. It's all cultural diffusion.
Yeah.
So I have the very this is a sermon I will give eventually at some point. It's like one of those things in the back, like the one who was here this past Shabbos. So the sermon I gave this Shabbos is one of my signatures that I do, and once a year I will give some iteration of that sermon. Those who are not there, the very brief version of it goes as follows. Everyone, right? We all sign on to religious Zionism. We love Israel, right? Okay, everyone agrees. Beautiful. We're on a few things we could be on the same page about. But right, we all love Israel. So the question is, what does it mean to be religious Zionist? Is it that I'm a Torah observant Jew? And what do you know? I learned Torah, I read rabbinic literature, and it looks like Eretz Yisrael is a pretty central theme in the Torah. So we want to, want what's best for Eretz Yisrael. Or am I just happen to be a secular Jewish or I'm a Jewish nationalist, and my flavor of nationalism is of the religious sort. And this gets to the whole question about, so for instance, when we do our advocacy, so we were talking about this earlier, do I get up there? There was a presentation I saw somewhere at some place recently. I'll try to keep the details as vague as possible, where this individual was doing a presentation about how beautiful Israel is. He says, Hamas, they would never allow, a drag queen in Gaza. But in Israel and Tel Aviv, we have drag queens. We have all. I was like, no, that's the wrong message.
They're not murdering them.
Yeah, okay, good. I'm like, I understand.
Wasn't it Bialik who said
Oh,
Israel will be a country when Jewish policemen arrest Jewish prostitutes?
Something like that. Yeah, I forgot someone said that. Yeah.
I heard of the course these, but yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I give more or less that same. I usually save it for Pesach because I have a good word from the Chavetz Chaim, the Haggadah, but I'm not going to give away all my material tonight. Anyway, my friends, right? Toby, did I give that one back in Stanford? I must have done that at some point.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound familiar.
The message probably didn't land. All right. But that's something I come back to. Anyway, so this is what Ramosha Feinstein says. So we have even in Russia, certainly in Russia, it was tough to be a Jew, to say the least. Now that's the end of his initial tshuva from 1931. Let's hit the fast forward button. Actually, let's hit the skip scene. Actually, let's get to the next movie button, basically. The next tshuva is in a whopping 1976. We just jumped quite a few decades. Ramosha has since moved to America and has well established himself and his family, and at this point is seen pretty much as the Gadol Hador. Now, this is the more typical question, the question I opened up with, which is not the question of I will not get any chance to wear tefillin over the day, and I have to make the bracha before even the crack of dawn. This is the question of we start chakras at 6:30, a few minutes before our Misha Yakir, a few minutes before the Zman for tefillin, but then, sometime 10 minutes into davening, we hit the Zman. What do we do? So he says, I have a great strategy between Yishtabach and Kaddish. That's when we're going to do it, because there's this little what I like to call the eye of the storm, in which we're not supposed to speak during Psuki de Zimra, and we're certainly not allowed to speak during the blessings of Kriya Shema. But even though we're not really supposed to talk then either, there's a lot more latitude between Yishtabach and the half Kaddish that precedes Baruch Hu, because that's really the split between Psuki de Zimra and Birchos Kriya Shema. So thankfully, we got the page turner thing over here, which is kind of useful, especially on high holidays. It comes in handy. But I remember when I had to do, Toby, when I had to do in the chapel back at a Good Shalom, page announcements. So halakhically, you can't talk at that point after Baruch Hu, even for needs of the tefillah. So what I would do is I get up there right before the Kaddish, before Shir Malus, and then I would say, all right, guys, just put in bookmarks. Kriya Shema is on page X. Shemona Esrei is on page Y. Vocal page announcements will resume after Shemona Esrei. So that was my strategy. Subsequently, I actually found a tshuva from Rav Moshe that will talk about when we do minyanim, that he says that if a rabbi needs to page announce, and they're like, they absolutely need him to do it, and he needs to do it even during Kriya Shema, he says, you know what, the rabbi should daven biyachidas, he should daven on his own, and then come in, and then he could do his page announcements. Mind you, this is the same Rav Moshe Feinstein who adamantly has a couple of tshuvas where he says davening with a minyan is an absolute rabbinical obligation. So if he's saying that, Thankfully though, we have the page turner thing over here that everyone can see. The Gabayim do a good job maintaining it. I thought it was a very beautiful moment. I don't know if you guys saw it. Ben Goldman came for Shabbos. Jordan had to walk out for something, and then Ben took over the page turner. I'm like, okay, we got to get him back in here. We're gonna train him to take over at some point. By his own initiative, he went up there. It was great. Anyway, so that's the next tshuva, 1976, and the only noteworthy thing. I mean, there's a number of noteworthy things, but the thing I want to bring to our attention is that he says toward the end of the tshuva that usually if you look at, like, I bet you if you go on Halachapedia or the OU website, you look for a quick halachic guide of what to do. If you put on your talis and tefillin before the Zman, it says basically adjust it a little bit and then make the bracha, because that way you did an action, and that way it's over l'asiyasan, you recite the bracha before the action. But Ramosha actually argues that that's unnecessary. The reasoning is that if anyone ever learned Makos before, and if you did Daf Yomi, then you probably have done what?
Ages ago.
Ages ago. Okay, so Makos is a lot of Toby. We did Makos
I
together.
just said, yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear. It didn't come through for some reason on the audio. But yes, that was one of the masechtas that we did in my old show. It was Makos. So you might remember, possibly it's been a few years. At the end of Makos, toward the end of Makos, it talks about someone who's wearing shatnez, and he gets warned by the witnesses that he shall not wear shatnez, and he does not listen to them, then he could get flogged. He get malchus, he get lashes. The question is that lash ain bo maisa ain lo kanalav, that we only give lashes if someone actively violates the Torah. But here, I was just passively wearing the clothing. No, the Gemara tells us that even passively, in air quotes here, wearing shatnez is considered an action. Wearing clothing is active for this halacha.
Well, you
So he
put
says-
them on.
Right, but even if so,
That was
right, but then
active.
true. But then the Gemara says if he gets warned again and he didn't put it on and off, he still gets another round of lashes for that.
You walk, and when I learned check shatnez, the Rav who taught me said, you're wearing shatnez, you're making an aver, you're committing an aver with every step you take where you're wearing shatnez.
Right. Well, I think not even with every step. I think it's like kind of every moment. Certain mitzvahs are like ongoing ones. So the Minchas Chinuch talks about this for mezuzah. Mezuzah arguably is an ongoing mitzvah. So I like to use it, not that I understand investment so much, but I like to use like investment analogies sometimes when explaining schar v'onesh, even though it's a terrible way to go about it. So I was explaining to someone earlier today about why we wear a talis katan, why men will wear tzitzis under their clothing, even though we don't have to do it. Meaning the mitzvah is only if you have a four-corner garment, then you have to put the tassels on it. But there's no mitzvah to go out of my way to find a garment that needs tzitzis. But why do we do it? So the way I like to explain it is, we like to look for passive streams of income.
Right.
So there's those active mitzvahs I do that I get schar for, and like, hey, look, if I could just like wear this tzitzis and get like passive income all day, like then I start thinking to myself, like, oh my gosh, I can't take. So I remember when I was in camp as a kid, we had to wear tzitzis on our way to the pool. They were makbid on that. If you took off your, especially took off your yarmulke, even if you took off your tzitzis on the way to the pool, the counselor or someone in charge would they would give you malchus. They weren't hitting it. At my time, they weren't doing flogging anymore. In my age. So I remember in middle school, I did have an Archie comic book that got confiscated and thrown in the garbage. So I was very bitter. Rumamu. I went to single sex boys camps. Toby, don't you have like a grandkid in Rumamu? I feel like, or
I
you
did,
feel good?
Yehuda, yeah,
Yehuda.
he was there for like 10 years.
Toby was always my 5 towns representative at all the class. He has a lot of mishpacha in the 5 towns. So whenever I want to make a joke about the 5 towns or something, usually it's satirical, and she let me get away with it. I still remember, if you permit me, Toby, I remember when I was in Stanford, we had like a welcome to the community in someone's backyard, and I was going around introducing myself, meeting all the new people, and I was trying to figure out what brought everyone to Stanford. And I realized that there was like one commonality that everyone had. It said, we don't want to live in the 5 towns or Teaneck. That was like the rallying cry that brought everybody together. What?
Correct.
They-
Why?
Yeah.
I know, Toby. Okay, ain't come lahar. This is being recorded on YU Torah, guys. We can't go into this. Ask me after this year. I already permit myself enough liberties. Some, the good thing is no one outside of here really cares what I have to think. Some people, they have to get their shiurim edited. Like Toby, your friend, Rav Hershel Schechter, there was someone who had to edit his shiurim before they went on to YU Torah, because otherwise people from the Forward or the liberal Jewish media outlets would try to find something controversial, he said, and then they would go crazy on it.
It wasn't hard.
It wasn't that hard, yes. Okay, I got to stop. This is all YU Torah, guys. All right, we're going forward, my friends. All right. The next tshuva is where things get exciting for me. So this is Tavshin Lamed Tes. We are now in 1979. Ramosha Feinstein died in 1986. So he's right now, I don't like to say the height of his power. I mean, he wasn't power hungry, but this is the height of his influence. Early 80s still, but basically by the time you get to like in the early to mid 80s, I mean, basically he kind of peters off over there because he began to, he was in decline at that point. So this is what's interesting. I realize that it looks like I'm crossing it out because it's in black and white, but it's actually highlighted that there was a concern. This is Osei on page 2. Regarding the recitation of Shema and Shacharis, Shenikva me'amadina lahaktim zman hayom l'sham mechusar shemen hasreifa mitzad melchama shel ha'aravim. So there was a war. The oil embargo, right? You told me about this one, right, Lee? So apparently there were 2 oil embargoes.
Yes.
173 and 179.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the 79 one. You might be wondering, where's the 73 one? We'll get the early ones. We'll get there in just a minute. Apparently there's one in 70 or around 71 also. So we'll get there in just a minute.
But here it's referring to what it does with the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall if they changed.
So this one's in 1979, but
Sorry, I'll let you go.
oh, okay, so
I'm jumping ahead.
oh, I know very little about the history of the period.
Getting changed back and forth since World War I.
Yeah,
They keep tweaking.
Yeah.
It's not the fact that you're turning the clocks go backwards and forwards, that they keep opening and, making the period longer and shorter.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So anyway, they wanted to basically institute long-term daylight savings because as I finally figured out why it's called daylight savings, and the savings apparently is on the oil that we had very minimal reserves of. Now I think we have a strategic oil reserve, is my understanding.
Not much left of it, but that's another story.
Oh, really? Oh boy. Okay.
No. It was drained out in the previous administration to keep the prices low.
Oh.
That's what it was.
Oh, okay.
It's
Okay.
almost gone.
Okay.
The prices.
We have some. Let's move along.
Oh yes, I remember during election season. Also, everything got lower. Okay. Anyway, going forward, my friends. Yeah. Okay.
I go to Detroit, and Detroit.
Oh yeah.
the clock is 38 minutes greater than it is either from here or from New York. So in other words, like for example, Shabbos starts
Later and ends later.
and then the daylight, like for example, when I went there in December, it was, almost, I already did work if I wanted to follow its laws.
Detroit Eastern time.
Yes.
Yeah, Eastern time.
Eastern time.
Well, we go to- I'm not trying to.
Yeah, not that.
Yeah. The Zmanim implications. Yes.
When I go to the right border, it's like all lines crossing.
So future year, we're going to talk about Zmanim on airplanes also. That's coming up. It's coming up, my friends. We're not going to get to it tonight, unfortunately, but we're having a fun time, I hope. But it's in this packet actually. There's a little section on airplanes. Okay. So what's he say over here? So this tshuva, I'm not going to say it's precisely the same, but the analysis in here is essentially conceptually identical to the analysis all the way back in his 1931 tshuva, which, hey, look, if the halakhic analysis was legit back then, it should be just as good right now. The same reasoning shouldn't shift with the times if, like half a century or whatever later. So, I'm not going to completely rehash everything, but one thing I will point out, he says, while tzitzis are easier because since we wear a talis katan, a smaller talis under our clothing, one could just quickly recite the bracha on that after Zman later. There's no real mitzvah to go out of your way to wear the talis gadol. It's fine. If a day passes and you wear talis gadol, you're fine. But he says when it comes to the tefillin, once again on page 3, I highlighted Rabbeinu Peretz. Cites the same Rabbeinu Peretz that is cited in the Torah. And he says, now one might think to say, wait a minute. I get that I'm going to wear the tefillin earlier because I'm going to miss out on the mitzvah entirely. But since Rabbeinu Peretz is a minority opinion, shouldn't we apply the principle of Safek Brachos Lahakel? That when we have a doubt whether to recite a blessing or not, we err on the side of caution. We don't recite a blessing, right? I'm like, oh, did I make a Borei Nefashos after? Well, assuming I drank enough of a revius of water in one shot. But
It's not the same thing. That's like the suffix of whether the halacha is to make the bracha or not. It isn't the suffix of whether you did make the
Ooh,
bracha.
you're good. So we have what's called a suffix in Metzias and a suffix in Psak, David. Excellent point. This will be very good when we get to our next year, by the way. So keep this in mind, but I'll explain for now. There's one kind of suffix or doubt, which is a suffix in did I make a bracha achrona? Did I make a blessing or did I not make the blessing already? That's factual. Either I did or I didn't. It's a binary. I just simply don't know. But in theory, if I had a video camera, a footage on my lips, we could ascertain the truth, right, Joe? If we look at the video cameras afterwards, you'll be able to get me the answer on that. I'm just kidding. Don't worry. So yeah, Joe's always I'm always being watched. It's comforting. Hashem and Joe are always with me. So anyway, as I was saying, so there's a suffix also in Psak, which is the Shulchan Aruch says A, the Rama says B. Well, I guess that's easier because one's Sephardic, one's Ashkenazic, but Rav Moshe Feinstein says A, the Tzitz Eliezer says B. Which one do I go with? So that is what we call a doubt in halacha, in which both sides have merit, and it's just a doubt as to which one we paskin like. So Rav Moshe actually, when we get to, right now we're not doing nitty gritty Zmanim. Right, this is like I just introduced a few concepts. In the coming year, we're going to get a little bit nitty grittier on the time for when Shabbos ends and those kind of things. There, we're going to bring in, but like basically a suffix of when is nighttime. Bein hashmashos, twilight is an inherent suffix, and then he's going to combine it with a suffix of whose conception of where the cutoff is do we paskin like? Do we go with Rabbeinu Tam? Do we go with the Gra? So he's going to combine those. So excellent point. I'm glad you brought that up, David. It's a very important point. But what I want to point out over here is that he says, he says, even though it's a minority opinion, go ahead, make the bracha on that basis, because if you do the mitzvah, but do not recite the bracha, something in my kishka is going to tell me, it's not a real mitzvah. It's not good enough for me to make a bracha on it. Is it really? And then maybe I won't bother putting on the tefillin later after the Zman. Or maybe, I'm just going to say, who cares about the tefillin? I'm not really doing the real McCoy anyway. So this is very fascinating. In his halachic analysis, he says, go with this minority opinion, even so far as to recite the blessing, even though it's a minority opinion. And, I could play it safe. If I put on tefillin without reciting the bracha, I still fulfill the biblical level. I still fulfill the mitzvah midoraisa. But so there is a Rabbi Shimon Finkelstein. So he's from Mechon Al Azayis. He's the main manager on the Sefer that Amir Hashem is coming out, in which the acknowledgments are in English. So we're in the middle of finalizing the cover design and the final things. So he had a nice article recently I read about how sometimes the rabbis have the power to actually change the deoraisas, the biblical level. Sometimes they could change the parameters. So for instance, the rabbis have the power to determine what exactly is considered sitting within the sukkah, even for a biblical level. This is a toast. We did this one at a Go Shalom together, all the way at the beginning of Masechah Sukkah, one of the first few blot. Tosfos there says that if you put up boards for your schach, there was something called Gezeres Tikra, that if the if the schach is, if each independent piece of the schach is too wide, you eventually feel like you're living in a house because they're so thick. So they made something called gezeres tikra, which is has to be thinner. So the question is, well, that's a rabbinical institution. What if I sit in that sukkah? Okay, so I don't fulfill on the Dirabanan level, but maybe at least on the biblical level, I still fulfill the mitzvah. So it's a debate, but according to one opinion in the Rishonim, the rabbis can actually change the definition even of the fulfillment on a biblical level. So he had a great article where he kind of summarized instances in a halacha. One of my favorite ones, by the way, is can the rabbis change theology? And what I mean by that is that God in the Torah promised us blessing if we keep Shemitah on the sabbatical year. So the question is, nowadays, most poskim hold that Shemitah, that leaving that observing the sabbatical year in Israel, is a rabbinical level mitzvah. So if I observe it on a rabbinical level and I say, I'm going to be a good farmer, I'm going to have faith in God that my farm will still be here in a year from now, I'm going to keep the mitzvah. Does God's guarantee of blessing necessarily apply if I'm only doing it on a rabbinical level? I still got to do it because it's rabbinically mandated, but do I get the associated blessings that are guaranteed by the Torah if it's not on a biblical level? So I think the Bach has that question. So to me, that was fascinating because it's not just a legalistic question. It's can the rabbis like shift the will of God almost? To me, that to me was a fascinating question. Yeah, of course, but yeah, that's a fair point. Yeah, exactly. That's probably what we advise the farmers. Anyway, so that's the important part of those tshuvos. Okay, let me just pause. Anything just in terms of like Tefillin, questions on technology, because this is where we're going to shift gears in just a moment. Okay, I'm excited. Let's shift the gears. Okay, I gave Tokyo Dibor, I think. So now. Turn to page number 8. All right. We may even be able to have 3 aliyahs over here because we got some reading to do in English on the bottom of page 8. So it was brought to my attention that the Agudath Israel, bottom of page 8, the Agudath Israel of America. So remember, Moshe Feinstein became eventually the top rabbi. I was going to say top honcho, didn't sound very reverent. He's a top rabbi for the Agudas Yisrael. So what happened was there's an article on their website, Agudath Israel helped stop permanent daylight savings bill, exceedingly disruptive to Orthodox Jewish life. And in the subtitle, Aguda advocacy in accordance with 1971 unpublished tshuva by Rav Moshe Feinstein Zatzal on permanent DST, daylight savings time. And that piques my interest. Because you remember the sample of tshuvos I presented on the sheet here, 1931, 76, and then 1979. But remember, my friends, Lee, Michelle, you pointed out to us that, we didn't have to wait till 1979 to have an oil crisis. It was already going on in the early 1970s as well. And so, according to this, apparently in 1971 already, there was already some surge that was happening.
72 because of the Yom
72?
Kippur War.
Ah.
It was the Arabs created an oil embargo as well as the Yom Kippur War. So that's 73.
So I don't know. They say this is 1971. Something else must have been brewing before that. I guess they were already considering doing daylight savings time. Maybe that
Daylight saving has been here for a long time. The book discusses it. Has a lot to do with store owners wanted more hours of light so people after work could go out and shop.
If you send me the book, I could reference it in the article. I'm writing it right now.
I'll find you.
Yeah, if you send it to me. Mayor, you're going to get a shout out in the end notes of the next Unpacking Igros article. Give me the reference.
It's all kinds of.
And then I heard in Arizona, which is the one state in America that is not.
Oh, yeah, in the morning's tough.
I heard because of a Jewish fellow who owned a lot of private.
Oh, so good. So let's read the article.
They tell me in Arizona.
All right, my friends.
There also was a thing, they didn't want kids to wait in the school bus in the dark.
All right, it's all in the article. It's all in the article, my friends. All right, let's get a Balkore. Who's our first Balkore for tonight? Lee?
The effort in the 117th Congress to permanently extend daylight savings.
Try to turn this.
Came to a sputtering end as the House of Representatives refused to act on the measure. This was due in large part by the efforts of the Agudath Israel of America which played a leading role in making known the unique and disruptive challenges permanent DST would present to the Orthodox Jewish community, thereby stunting its progress on Capitol Hill.
Oh, yeah, I put in ellipses there. This isn't even the full article. I try to cut out some stuff.
Two primary concerns were brought to the legislators' attention. The first related to an unintended consequence change DST would have on the fundamental aspect of Jewish religious life, mourning, davening. Under halakha, tefillah shacharis and the mitzvahs associated with it are regulated according to solar positioning in the sky, and are to perform no earlier or later than at certain specified times. Fuel schedules are set up in line with those times. With a change in DST and subsequent later sunrise, the times for davening and its accompanying mitzvahs will be altered, which in turn will undermine their proper observance, discourage shul attendance, and result in late arrival for work.
Okay, good. And then we could skip to as a actually, did we skip the school bus thing? Yeah, let's go to as a representative.
As a representative of the spectrum of yeshivas and Jewish day schools, the Good of Israel's other primary concern centered around children walking, carpooling, or taking the bus to school in the pre-sunrise darkness. The increased risk of accidents and injuries that could result. Indeed, during the Arab oil embargo in the early 70s, when the 2-year-long DST was attempted, the experiment was cut short to less than a year due to the public outcry over numerous reported incidents of children being killed, injured, and assaulted as they traveled to school in the pitch black streets. The alternative would be for these Jewish schools, which often include morning davening, to begin the school day at a much later hour, a detrimental change decried by many yeshiva principals and educators as well as parents.
All right, let's get one more Balkore. Wants to be David, go for it.
Agudath Israel's advocacy on the issue is consistent with the 1971 Teshuvah to then Agudath Israel President Rabbi Moshe Scherer Zatzal, penned by the Rav Goen Moshe Feinstein Zatzal, who addressed the issue during an early legislative attempt to make DST permanent. Pointing out the difficulties regarding proper davening facing those who go to work, Rabbi Feinstein wrote that it is clear that we must fight against such a bill with every means of advocacy, and that it constitutes a gezerah mamish al hadfila lirei Hashem yisparach. Right?
Yeah.
Ultimately,
So it's a decree on all those who are God-fearing.
Right. Ultimately, the multi-pronged effort by Agudath Israel and opposition by others were successful in slowing down and eventually ending further action in the House. Representative Frank Pallone, chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, stated that the legislation would not proceed without a full airing of the various issues. And as the months passed,
Something like good bureaucracy, right?
where's the chairman?
Did I not staple that one right? There on top.
Chairman Pallone and others on the committee continued to hear from Agudath Israel and its allies, leading the chairman to conclude that there was no consensus in the House as to whether to keep the status quo or to go to either permanent standard or daylight savings time. The issue harkens back to other times that the Aguda has fought against such legislation. Aside from the 1970s, in 2005, as part of the Energy Policy Act, DST would have been extended by 2 months. Aguda and its allies were successful in paring down that effort to a 4-week extension, which, based on the calendar, would have had a minimal effect on Orthodox Jewish life.
There we go. Now that's what I call allyship. Yeah, Jewish constituent, Orthodox Jewish constituents.
Yeah, so you must have some Jewish constituents.
All right. So here's the question. This is where you take the vote, guys. I got more material, but in order to unpack it properly, it would take 15 minutes. So we could cut it over here and just start with it. Okay, that's it. Very good. So there'll be, next time we meet, we will do a part 2. Now, I need to figure this out because I want to make sure we cover Thanksgiving before Thanksgiving comes upon us, but we have enough time till then. So, okay, good. We'll continue with part 2 of, it's gonna be like a 3 or 4 part thing at some point next week. So we'll wrap this one up. We have some interesting things on this tshuva. So if you look just briefly over here, here's a picture of the tshuva. So as of now, we're concluding that we read the article which references a tshuva about Moshe Feinstein in 1971, but we are yet to actually look at the tshuva itself. It is pictured here, it is printed here on the sheet, and I have some, I think there's some interesting novel information that goes beyond the technicalities of Zmanim to actual community considerations. So we're going to go with that next time. And then we'll probably begin our discussion about when should Shabbos end. And there too, it may sound like a technical question, but it's going to be really fascinating takeaways as well. So with that, we will conclude for this evening, my friends. And glad to get back to learning together. Thank you for coming, both in person and virtually.
Thank
All
you.
right, Joe, Laura, good seeing you guys. Take care.
Bye.